Diablo Immortal's initial reveal at BlizzCon was mired in controversy as the fans weren't too happy about the franchise owner's move to mobile. The game's actual release, however, has set the internet alight in a whole other way due to its predatory microtransactions, which raises the question, if someone as big as Diablo isn't safe from the insane pay-to-win model, then what does it mean for the industry at large? Well, let's dive in and discuss. First up, Diablo Immortal was doomed from the beginning. Let's rewind back to 2018. You've got hundreds of people at BlizzCon, all hyped up to see the next installment of their favorite franchise. Up comes the banner saying, Diablo Immortal. The crowd goes wild, and it seems like everything about this moment is perfect. Well, at least that's what we thought anyway. But as soon as the trailer switched to a screen saying coming soon to mobile, all that joy turned into utter confusion. Diablo on mobile? How does that even work? And while the devs did come out to answer all the concerns in the Q&A later, they also made a grave mistake. When the fans asked whether they'd be releasing it on PC as well, since it did have some pretty neat feature upgrades over Diablo 3, they responded by saying that they didn't have plans for that. Now, in a hall full of PC gamers, you're obviously gonna hear some boos after this response. With that said, the devs kinda made it worse by mockingly asking, "Do you guys have phones?" Which, to this day, is a quote that people use to describe the game's ill-fated reveal. So, despite having a pretty great showing gameplay-wise, Diablo Immortal's reputation among the gaming community has already been tarnished. Oh, and Blizzard spent the next 4 years trying to fix that one lapse in judgment by saying stuff like, "This is a complete Diablo experience," and also releasing it on PC. But as they say, the first impression is the last impression, and no amount of backtracking was going to change people's opinion. Next, Blizzard's own issues are mirrored in Diablo Immortal. Of course, we've seen tons of games get flack at launch, and then do a complete U-turn later. No Man's Sky is a prime example of that. However, the issue with Diablo Immortal wasn't even the fact that it was a bad game, or that it shipped with broken promises. In fact, we'd go even as far as to say that it's actually one of the better entries in the franchise, and blows most mobile games out of the water. With that said, the fact that it pushes such an aggressive monetization model at its players just doesn't sit right with fans. Like, Diablo's supposed to be a AAA franchise. Why do people have to pay thousands of dollars just to get incrementally better loot? Or is it just because the game's on mobile? Yes, it's true that games that don't target consoles or PC usually have these pay-to-win structures to attract sharks. But the thing is that something like Diablo should have never fallen victim to such practices. Oh, and it's not just the social media that's mad, as the game's currently sitting at a 0.2 user score on Metacritic. To understand what went wrong with Immortal, however, we gotta stop reducing it to its free-to-play mobile release and look elsewhere. You see, Blizzard's been in a bit of a pickle for a few years now. Their great franchises like World of Warcraft or Overwatch just aren't as popular anymore. Plus, with all the other workplace harassment stuff going on within the company, it's safe to say that it's a dumpster fire over there. Also, yes, Microsoft's acquiring them soon, but that deal doesn't close at least till next year. In essence, Diablo Immortal's issues are a direct result of a desperate attempt to appease shareholders and extract some extra cash out of the customers. Besides, it's not like their other franchises have enough power to do that anyway. So, Diablo's the only sacred thing that's still left untouched in their library. Maybe StarCraft, but that's kinda dead at this point anyway. No, this isn't turning into a trend. Despite all these explanations for what went wrong with Diablo Immortal, you've still gotta address the elephant in the room. Are video games actually heading in this direction? Well, if you're worried about that, you'd have to spend thousands to get competent gear for your console or PC games in the future. Then, you've got nothing to fret about. You see, mobile games are inherently designed differently because they're not meant to be played like a run-of-the-mill PC game. Like your normal expectation from a AAA games that you sink a lot of hours into it, become become a merchant of death, and then you're done. Mobile games, on the other hand, are meant to be played at a much slower cadence. If you hit a time wall, you just stop playing for a while and come back later. It's more of an ongoing process rather than a single sprint. But obviously, when you're used to playing console or PC games, it's hard to reprogram your brain to come to terms with this. As for the pure video game experiences that we've got today, they're not going anywhere soon either. Yes, live service games are dominating the industry, but even their microtransactions are limited to cosmetics that don't affect the gameplay in any way. Plus, even if a developer does decide to add pay-to-win elements in its games, it gets nuked into oblivion on social media. Like, we all remember what happened when EA decided that it'd be a good idea to lock certain weapons and vehicles behind paywalls in Star Wars Battlefront 2. Also, subscription services like Game Pass and PlayStation Plus have kinda alleviated devs' fears about not reaching a wide enough player base for these types of experiences. So rest assured, traditional video games aren't going anywhere. As for Diablo Immortal, the fact of the matter is that this game was just designed for mobile phones, and that the audience has a certain way of playing games. And honestly, that's okay. Besides, for those of us who want to get that classic Diablo experience on a console or PC, we've got Diablo 4 to look forward to, which looks like it's going to be an absolute treat. Now, in other related news, Overwatch 2 director explains the game's new approach. Of course, you can't talk about Activision Blizzard without mentioning Overwatch, which is a franchise that's kinda stuck in limbo land right now. On one hand, you've got a sequel with new maps and characters. On the other hand, though, it just doesn't feel different enough to justify a whole new game. According to the game's director Aaron Keller, however, players are gonna start to see the difference once the roadmap unravels after launch. Speaking to GameSpot, he said that the new 5v5 format combined with the free-to-play direction means that players will get a brand new experience, whether they're veterans or just checking Overwatch out for the first time. The biggest change, however, is gonna be the game's content delivery method. In the past, we've seen Blizzard drop content in chunks, but with Overwatch 2, players can expect a consistent flurry of new stuff from season to season that's way more expensive than anything they've shipped before. And of course, there's the PvE mode coming out later next year too, which is gonna totally change the game's landscape. Next, The Quarry was originally slated for Stadia. The Quarry from Supermassive Games has been the star of the summer so far, as it's more of a spiritual successor to the incredibly well-received Until Dawn, rather than the Dark Pictures anthology. And what that means is that not only is the game longer, but it's also got a higher budget, a great cast, and some really good narrative design. According to a recent report, however, the game wasn't supposed to come to PC and consoles at all. Instead, it was slated to be a Google Stadia exclusive. Apparently, this game and Squanch Games' High on Life were both meant to take advantage of Google's cloud infrastructure and draw players to the company's streaming service. After its initial failure and eventual downsizing, though, that deal kinda got scrapped, resulting in the game's release on other platforms. With that said, sources do say that Supermassive was desperate for publishers after the deal with Google fell through. Luckily, Take-Two showed up just in the nick of time and drove the project to completion. Lastly, Final Fantasy VII announcements raise eyebrows. Final Fantasy VII's 25th anniversary stream was jam-packed full of new announcements, as fans not only got confirmation of Remake's sequel called Rebirth, but also a full remaster of Crisis Core coming this winter. Among all this excitement, however, there were also a few eyebrows raised once again. Xbox fans were left wondering why why Square Enix hasn't released it on Microsoft's platform yet. After all, it was still releasing on Steam, and most people guessed that Sony's exclusivity deal would have run out by now. With that said, a new report revealed that the Final Fantasy VII Remake franchise's release on Xbox is actually much farther in the distance. Apparently, the PlayStation deal doesn't run out until all 3 remakes in the trilogy are out, meaning that we're at least 3 years away from these games showing up on Game Pass. At the same time, though, it's puzzling why Square would release Crisis Core on Xbox, since that game's also heavily tied to 7's story. What do you think? Is there any chance that we'll see Final Fantasy VII Remake on Xbox within the next year or two, or is there actual truth to the report? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.